What you know, Alibiers. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Friday, August 22nd, day one of the Donna Adelson trial in the books. I never thought I would see this day come, but here we are. Interesting day. RIvera, last one on the stand. He's finished for now. He will definitely be recalled at a later time. And Monday morning, I believe Wendi Adelson will be first up on the stand. She was in the courthouse today with her attorney, but did not make it up there. So come watch live with us. Also, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe and click that bell icon if you want notifications of when I post new content. Today, I did a few YouTube shorts to tell you guys some things that happened in real time so I wouldn't have to wait until tonight. So if you want those kind of updates, ring my bell. If you don't know, I've already put out the recap of opening statements by the state and the defense. So if you haven't watched that yet, just go look on my page. It should be right there. Let's hop into the first witnesses. First up was James Geiger. He is Dan's neighbor. He and his wife were looking towards Trescott and heard a loud popping bang sound. He immediately got up and walked to this big picture window at the front of their house to see where it came from. They bring in a photo of his residence that shows the view from that window, and something got his attention. He saw a car rapidly backing out and heading towards Benton Road. He said the car was going fast, and he noticed it appeared to be a light-colored Prius. That was so key in this investigation, y'all. He gave them their first big clue that ultimately led to Sigfredo and Rivera. He said there had been some break-ins in the neighborhood, and he thought maybe somebody was trying to break into Dan's house. So he walked over to see if he could see any damage to the house. He got right there at the garage, and the garage door was open, and the car was running, and he saw Danny inside, so he turned around and walked back to his house. He stood at his front window and looked out, waiting about 5 minutes, and realized this did not seem right. He said Danny hadn't backed out, and he told his wife, "I think something's wrong. I'm going to walk back over." He goes towards the garage and gets inside, and he notices the car is still running. So he walked in all the way to make sure everything was okay. That's when he noticed the window to Dan's car was shattered and he was stepping on glass. Then he sees what he says is a bloody head, and the head was slowly rolling back and forth. So he hollered out, "Danny, what happened?" And he got no response. He hollered again, nothing. So he knew he needed to call EMS. He realized his cell phone wasn't in his pocket, so he ran to his house and called 911. He said from the time he saw the Prius leave to when 911 was called was between 5 to 10 minutes. They bring in photos of Dan's driveway and also photos of the Prius that were captured on that city bus camera. Going back, he said when Danny and Wendi moved in, they had a housewarming party, and that's when they first met. But after that, they really weren't close. He said they had their kids close together, and later on, they knew that Wendi left Dan and that they were divorcing. They barely saw Danny after that and didn't see the kids. He said it took forever after calling 911. They were asking questions like, is he still breathing? So he would go check. And he said Dan's head would still be rolling left to right. They play the 911 call, and he really just recounts on the call what he just testified to. He didn't know if somebody shot him or if he maybe did it to himself. The 911 call was 14 minutes long. He said it took about 12 minutes for the first officer to arrive on scene and around 19 minutes for paramedics to get to Danny's home. That was it for his testimony, and there was no cross. And bless his heart, y'all, he just seems like a sweet older man, and I'm sure what he saw that day will haunt him. The next witness, David Sims, he is a retired sergeant from the Tallahassee Police Department. He heard the call go out about the shooting, and he arrived on scene first. He made contact with Mr. Geiger, and they show photos of the car in the garage. He said it was running when he got there. He called out to Dan and saw the window was broken at an angle, and then he saw that rounded spot, which is where the bullet entered. He said Dan was slumped over and gasping for air. He said it was like a sucking sound. He noticed that half of his glasses were in his lap. Dan had a cell phone in his left hand and a business card in his right hand. Remember, he was talking to that school that Wendi wanted to enroll the boys in when he got shot. The sergeant reached in where the glass was broken to unlock the car. So he went over to the other side and turned the ignition off. It was then that he saw the other half of Dan's glasses on the floorboard. They show pictures of the shattered glass, and then he said at this point he could hear EMS coming. After he heard the sirens, he pulled out a gym bag so that EMS could make better entry and get to Dan quicker. They show photos of half of the glasses laying on the floor of the garage, and what happened is when they were treating him or moving him, that and his cell phone fell out onto the garage floor. He said there was no indication this was a robbery and no sign of a struggle. There was no cross by the defense. The next witness, Joanne Maltese, she is retired from the Tallahassee Police Department, where she worked as a forensic specialist. She took photos of the crime scene. Now, during her testimony, Donna was emotional. I didn't see any tears, but also I wasn't there. But from where I sat here in my studio, I didn't see any tears. They go through all of those pictures. They bring in Dan's glasses and lens into the courtroom. She tried to get prints from the scene. She dusted the entire exterior of the car, but there was nothing of value. She did some swabbing inside the car. She also swabbed the doorknob on the door that leads into the house. Nothing of value found. They bring in Dan's wallet. And then she also took photos of Wendi's minivan inside and out. And they bring in the photo of the bullet bourbon that Wendi bought that day along with the receipt. The purchase was made July 18th, 2014, the day of the murder, at 12:49 p.m. from an ABC liquor store. She also went to the hospital to document Dan's injuries and collect any evidence. They show photos of Dan in the hospital, and Joel from Surviving the Survivor is in the courtroom and said that Dan's mom, Ruth, had to leave. His sister looked down, but his daddy looked at those photos. As they're showing all of these photos of him in the hospital, Donna is doing her emotional thing. The next witness is Dr. Clark. He was the medical examiner who did the autopsy on Dan the next day, July 19th, 2014. They show a photo of an x-ray, and he points out the 2 bullets as well as the fragments. They show an identification photo that they take after they clean somebody up. He said there was a lot of damage to the left side of Dan's face, and he had those 2 bullet wounds. One of the gunshots was irregular. He said the way it hit the bone, it caused damage. He had swelling in his face as well as those raccoon eyes. He also had superficial abrasions, and they were different sizes. He explains when a bullet goes through a window or something like that, it causes splintering, and then that hits the skin and leaves those marks. He had that on the left side of his face, his neck, and his ear. On the left side of Dan's neck and ear, there was extensive pseudo-stippling. He had bleeding into the left side of his face with distorting of the face, and that drained into his neck. The other gunshot wound was pretty much between his eyebrows. It wasn't round because of the bone shelf, and the finer stippling on the forehead was from gunpowder. That would put the muzzle close to Dan by inches. On his left forearm, he had a ring of soot and stippling, and that would be consistent with Dan having his arm up. He said the arm was likely put up to the center of the head in a defensive type stance. He also had stippling from his glasses being hit by the bullet. He explains that stippling from gunfire is smaller and irregular. He also had some other gunpowder stippling on his arm, and that would put the distance between Dan and the gun at an average of 18 to 24 inches away. The first shot, he believes, was to the left cheek area through that windshield, and it fractured his jaw and his left cheekbone. That was not immediately fatal. The second shot to the forehead, that would be your fatal gunshot wound. They show photos of the projectiles they recovered after Dan passed away. He said that Dan lived around 11 hours after being shot. There was no cross by defense. Next up was Craig Isom from the Tallahassee Police Department. He was the one that interviewed Wendi, but first, after the shooting, he approached her at a restaurant on Market Street around 2:15 p.m. She was with others, and he said he needed to speak to her privately. So he got her about 15 feet away and said he needed to talk about something that happened with Dan. He told her her kids were at daycare and they were fine. So I stand corrected. I said on the crash course, Wendi never asked about her kids, and she didn't because he told her right out of the gate they were fine. He told her several times in the interview that she wasn't a suspect. She was given a victim's advocate, and he said he never accused her of anything. He did learn they were still battling things, including child custody, so they bring in the divorce file. He said they fought over things as small as a tennis racket. They explain about Wendi wanting to relocate to Miami, and they bring in documents that they know Donna saw. It was about Dan wanting that supervised visitation with Donna. That was pending at the time of his death. And the reason for that, he says, is because the kids reflected that Grandma says you're stupid and she hates you. They refer to the emails between Donna and Wendi where she calls him a lot of names like Elvis and a-hole. In an email from Donna to Wendi on March 6, 2013, she calls him a major effer. May 3rd, 2013, Donna emailed Wendi referencing relocation and said it was extremely important to Donna. The relocation was denied on June 20th, 2013. On June 25th, there is an email from Donna to Wendi where Donna proposed another plan to facilitate relocation in light of the court's ruling. She suggested the boys start attending a Christian or Catholic church, suggested that Wendi take photos and send those to Dan as a way to strong-arm him into relocation. She also suggested the $1 million bribe. The death benefits gained by Wendi after Dan's murder. There was a life insurance policy for $2 million and then another for $60,000 through the law school. The survivor benefits for the boys was $4,800 a month, which Wendi would have gotten and controlled. His employment pension through FSU was worth approximately $300,000. The total value of Dan's estate when he was killed was $2.7 million. One thing to note is at some point, and I would venture a guess it was after the divorce, he named his sister as the executor of his estate. So we're not exactly sure how much Wendi got and how much was in his sister's control. If you know that, let me know in the comments. He goes through a timeline of the day of the shooting. At 8:50 a.m., Dan dropped the kids off at preschool. Then he went to the gym across town. They show surveillance of the parking lot of that gym. At 9:11, you see Dan's car enter the parking lot. He gets out, and you see him walk in the door at 9:13. At 9:16, you see that Prius come into the parking lot, and the car parks, and nobody gets out. It stays in the parking lot the entire time that Dan is inside the gym. By 10:33, Dan leaves. That Prius follows him. They looked at the logical route to Dan's house from the gym, and they tried to get surveillance. That's when they got the city bus video from before and actually after the shooting. At 10:44 a.m., you see Dan's car on some surveillance. Then you see the Prius is right behind him. Another video is an overhead look from the city bus that pulled in right behind the Prius at a red light. They could not get the tag number from the video, and the investigator said that would have saved them a lot of time if they could have. At 10:51 a.m., you see the Prius in the left turn lane at an intersection, but Dan went down the road and turned. But that turn the Prius made would have also taken you to Dan's house. At 10:55, the Prius has left Dan's house and is on the move. So the window they figured where Dan was shot was between 10:51 and 10:55 a.m. After the shooting, from the city bus video, you see two people in the front seat of the Prius. Sigfredo is in the passenger seat in a white shirt, and he is very animated. The driver is in a solid black shirt. He also points out on the Prius, the side mirror is solid black, where usually it's the same color as the car, so they knew that had been replaced. They also see that sun pass, which is what you go through tolls with, in the top of the windshield. And also on the lower bumper, there is a tow hook that could be threaded in. Normally it has a cap, but this Prius, it's missing. Their research showed this was a 2006 to 2009 Prius, and the color was silver pine mica. 11:02 a.m., you get that 911 call. And the investigation had two different prongs, the motive and the Prius. They tracked the SunPass by calling the Florida DOT. They're the ones who administer those. He said they gave him thousands of results, and he was overwhelmed. And it didn't really narrow anything down quickly. At that time, though, SunPass was mainly for Orlando and to the south. And while Mr. Isom was following up on the SunPass leads, Sergeant Corbett was looking for phones of interest at Premier Gym and then traveling the route the suspects took to go to Dan's. Initially, because of the large number of cars, they started looking to South Florida for cars going through the interchange where you get on a turnpike from I-75, but that was a bust. But once the phone analysis was done, they had a better idea that there was one particular phone number, and tracking that phone to Naples and crossing over Alligator Alley on 75 west to east towards Broward County. It was a different route than what they would expect from somebody coming from Tallahassee down to Miami. Once they had that established, he contacted SunPass again and explained the car they were looking for, and they want to see if it went through this toll plaza in Naples going westbound. Once he gave them that information and the time frame, just within a couple of minutes, it showed an activation of the SunPass at the Naples toll plaza. It showed only one Prius went through, and that's when they determined that Prius was headed back to South Florida. They backtracked and found that on July 16th, that same SunPass activated through Broward County to the other end of the toll plaza and then cut across Alligator Alley up 75. And that was confirmed through phone records as well. They did get a photo of the license plate from the toll plaza. Then they were able to identify the SunPass and the customer who bought it. That led them to a rental place in Miami called Save Gas. When law enforcement went there, the owners found documentation related to that rental. It was RIvera that rented it, and he put his real phone number and his real address on there, as well as Sigfredo's phone number, and had him listed as brother. The car was rented July 15th, 2014. It was due back on the 17th, but wasn't turned in until the 21st. They show a chart with photos of the key players and their cell phone numbers, and it confirmed that both RIvera and Sigfredo's numbers were the ones he used on that contract to rent the car. They still couldn't establish any connection to the Adelson family. Eventually, they learned that Katie was the mother of Sigfredo's children and considered each other's spouses. And at the same time they find this out, they also find out she's been dating Charlie Adelson. That was the only connection they could find to Dan Markel. Also, that was later confirmed by the investigation and testimony. They investigated Katie. Her employment included. Her employment at the time of the murder was at another dental office. Post-murder, she started getting checks from the Adelson Institute. The Adelson Institute was operated by Charlie and Harvey Adelson. Charlie is a periodontist and Harvey a dentist. Donna was in the clerical department. She kept books for the business. They go into the Adelson Institute. He and Special Agent Sanford from the FBI went there and served a subpoena for her employment records. And initially, they got nothing. He said later on, the best he could get from an attorney who represented the dental office was a list of checks paid to Katie from the Adelson Institute. There were no W-2s, no responsibility form, and nothing showing she was employed there. The employees they talked to that day initially had no idea who Katie was. But another person came up to the front. Her name is Erica Johnson. She knew Katie's name but did not know what her responsibilities were there. There was nothing at all regarding any proof of employment other than the checks, which started 2 months after the murders, and that actually was September 18th, 2014, and they ended in March of 2016. He thinks it could have went into May of 2016, but those checks stopped shortly after the bump. The documentation provided by the Adelson Institute showed the checks were in consecutive order, and Donna signed every single one. Katie was arrested October 1st, 2016 during the day, and Isom was present for that. She contacted her attorney from that scene And the witness talked to her attorney and said he was interested in getting information from Katie about the other parties, maybe providing testimony about the other players, and if she wanted to cooperate with the investigation, to call him back, and he would go meet with her at the jail. Less than 20 minutes later, he got a call from a man named David Marcus, who said he was representing Charlie and said if Charlie was going to be arrested, to contact him. Now, there was an objection by the defense that was sustained. So on cross-exam, they point out he was the lead investigator on this case until his retirement. The defense asked if he learned that Donna and Harvey lived in Miami, and the witness said actually they were in Coral Springs. The defense asked if Donna and Harvey had a condo on Miami Beach, and the witness said they ended up there, but he doesn't know at the time of the homicide if they lived on Miami Beach. As they made that connection between Sigfredo and RIvera to Katie, then that connection to Charlie, you see Katie's unemployment status, and she's still paying her bills in South Florida. The defense asks, did Donna and Harvey share emails? And Wendi told you that in her interview? The witness doesn't remember if Wendi mentioned they shared emails or not. The defense says, you identified emails, and these are emails between Donna and Wendi? Yes. Defense, and some of these my client called Danny bad names, but she never said she hated him, and the witness said that came through the grandchildren. The defense points out they were around 3 and 4. The witness said they were young. You testified about a bribe. You're not a family law attorney, and you have no idea if it's okay to offer a financial incentive when it comes to relocation. The witness is like, this is not in my realm. You testified about the life insurance, the pension, and some of those funds went to his kids, with Wendi as the custodian. The witness says some, but some of that money also went to Dan's sister. The defense asked, did Donna receive benefit from Dan's pension or anything? No. When my client suggested dressing the kids up or putting them in a Catholic church, Wendi didn't do that, did she? And the witness says no. The Adelson Institute had a couple of employees there at the time, and the defense asked, did they have a written job description or job review? And he doesn't know. But he says you would think with them working on people's mouths, there'd be some scrutiny. Defense, you said you got a call from Charlie's attorney after Katie's arrest, not Donna's? No. Is it unusual for an attorney to inquire if there's a warrant for their client's arrest? And the witness said it was shocking to be within that short time frame for that call, and the only way that person had knowledge would be through Katie's attorney. And the man identifying himself as Charlie's attorney, that's where it had to come from, because at that point, the media was not on scene and nothing was made public about her arrest at that point. They ask about the grandmother motion and say, you're educated. Absent some legal knowledge, can you interpret what's being requested in the motion? And the witness said, I think it's pretty plain. So back to the emails between Wendi and Donna. There is an Evite from June 3rd, 2014 for Harvey's big birthday. It's to Wendi, Ben, and Lincoln. Do you know how these are generated? And the witness says, well, somebody has to go in and set it up and send them out. So they go through emails from 2014, which is donnaharvey@gmail.com with Harvey's name next to it, not Donna's. In one email from September 12th, 2014, it says Lincoln will attend Tot Shabbat with his grandfather Harvey. In another email from donnaharvey@gmail on Friday, July 18th, Harvey's name is who it's from. And it says, Wendi, this is the information on work order for repair for TV, July 18th, 2014, between 8 and 12. And it's signed Dad. Defense says, my client isn't Dad, is she? The witness says, no. They show a Geek Squad schedule with a Q&A that asks if an earlier appointment is available, would you accept it? And it says yes. On redirect, the defense pointed out that Harvey and Donna share an email, and some are signed Dad and some are signed Mom. The witness says yes. So they point out an email from May 3rd, 2013. She reads a little bit. It says, the most important part of your divorce is relocation. And going to the end, it says, love you. And she asked, who signed that? And the witness says, Mom. There was another email, June 27th, 2013, signed Mom and Dad. Yes. And the state points out, so they got some emails from Mom, some from Mom and Dad. Yes. And that was it for him for now. He will be back up at some point. And the last witness of the day, Luis Rivera. He explains he's from Puerto Rico and he lived in Miami. He is incarcerated for this case currently, as well as a federal sentence. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and got 19 years to run concurrent with that federal sentence. He said he and Sigfredo were childhood friends and he had to turn on one of his best friends to get the deal. He's asked if Katie enlisted Sigfredo to be part of the murder. When he's asked who enlisted Katie, he says he's not really sure, but he knew this was a murder for hire. Katie brought them the money, and the purpose of the murder was that Wendi wanted the kids, and he knew they were there to kill the father of the kids so that she could have them. He names Wendi a couple of times during this testimony, by the way. They ask about the dentist. He said it was Charlie, who was Katie's boyfriend or side piece or whatever you want to call him. He never had contact with Charlie or the Adelsons, and he knows nothing about them. He was to be paid $35,000, and he doesn't know how much the job paid, but he knows Sigfredo got $40,000 and Katie got $40,000, and ultimately in the end it was for a total of around $100,000. Garcia got that one-time payment, and then he's asked if he knew anything about Dan. No. Katie gave Sigfredo a paper showing Dan's photo and his home address. He had never been to Tallahassee before, but he came twice, once in June and then in July. They show a photo of Sigfredo, Katie, RIvera, and his significant other, who is named Jessica. At the time of the murder, Katie was with both Sigfredo and Charlie. RIvera was living with his significant other, Jessica. Where he was living, that was put on the rental application for the Prius. The first trip, the car was rented by Sigfredo. Sigfredo was the one that had the paper with Dan's photo on both trips. The first trip, they followed him to see where he lived, and he can't remember if they were actually going to kill him on that first trip, so he's asked if they had a gun, and he said yes. They brought two along. One of those he purchased himself, and then Sigfredo brought his .38 along as well. On that first trip, they did go to Dan's residence, and the reason was to scope it out, and they followed him to the daycare. On that first trip, they were in Tallahassee a couple of days. He said the reason Dan wasn't killed on that first trip is RIvera said he wasn't going to do it in front of the kids, and Dan had the kids, and then they also lost sight of Dan at the preschool. He was told they needed to go back and do the job if they wanted to get the money. That information came from Sigfredo, so RIvera rented the Prius. They both brought their phones, and they both turned them off before the shooting. On that second trip, they rented a hotel room, but they only brought one gun. It was a .38 revolver. Then they ask about when there was a hole shot in the floor of the Prius, and RIvera kind of chuckles, and he says Sigfredo got the gun and shot it through the floorboard of the passenger side, which hit the gas line. He said the car started slowing down little by little. They saw a local drug dealer that they happened to meet the first trip who took Sigfredo to AutoZone to get a piece of hose to put that back together. He said Sigfredo was good with cars, so he fixed that gas line. They followed Dan to the preschool, and they saw him drop the kids off. Then they followed him to the gym. He's asked by the state if there was a reason the murder had to happen that day, and he said because Dan was going out of town the next day. That information was given to him by Sigfredo, who got it from Katie, who got it from Wendi. He's asked if he thinks Wendi talked to Katie about Dan's travel plans. He said yes, but he also wasn't there for that call. He did not personally know Wendi, but knew she wanted her kids. He does admit to driving the Prius seen on video to Dan's house. He said they pulled into the driveway. Sigfredo jumped out. Dan's in the car. He shot him twice through the window, and he said it was only seconds they were in that driveway. RIvera said he was not going to be the shooter because he didn't want to do it. On the bus video they show, you see Sigfredo kind of jumping around in the passenger seat. RIvera said he was trying to hide the gun. Eventually, Sigfredo tossed that gun into the ocean somewhere on the way back to Miami from an overpass. He said at one point they stopped to eat, and then they went to the ATM in Miami, and they show him the photos from that. The first phone call after the shooting was to Katie by Sigfredo. He could hear Katie on the other end, and Sigfredo let her know it was done and to get the money. He said he got the money the next day. He got a call from Katie, who was looking for him to give him his money. He said she never calls him, but she couldn't get Sigfredo on the phone. At that point, Sigfredo was living with another woman whose nickname is Shrimp. He was not living with Katie, and again, they were just on again, off again. He was in the barber shop and Katie and Sigfredo went to his house, and his significant other called him. He got $35,000, and he said it was weird because the money was stapled into bundles of $1,000 in each bundle, and he had never seen that before. Sigfredo bought a motorcycle and a car, and RIvera bought a motorcycle. He said he thinks they bought those about a month after the murder. RIvera said he did not know Charlie had a safe full of money, and he didn't know Charlie was the one paying for it. And he kind of grins as he says this, and he said, if I did, I would have just robbed Charlie himself. And he said, in fact, he suggested on the way to Tallahassee just that. But Sigfredo said it wouldn't work. If I recall correctly, from another trial where he testified, he suggested robbing the lady, meaning Wendi. RIvera identified voices on a phone call for law enforcement, but they don't bring those in. And he will definitely be back up on the stand at some point. But the defense did get up and cross. She says, I want to make sure I understand. The first trip, you scoped Dan's house, you saw him take the kids to school, and then he lost you. On the second trip, you knew he would take them to school, and you followed him again, and you knew he would go to the gym. RIvera said he did not know Dan was going to the gym. Defense, you said the woman who wanted him to be killed passed you, Sigfredo, and she says Katie, but Katie wasn't there. This is when RIvera says he saw Wendi walking with the boys near Dan's house. But the defense asked, was that Wendi Adelson? And he said yes. Defense, she wanted her children, and he said absolutely. You see here, this is very different than Charlie's trial, y'all. She is not going the extortion route for her defense. She's just going to say that the state hasn't proven their case. Now, in openings, Charlie was thrown under the bus, and just here, they wanted that jury to hear Wendi wanted her children. It's going to be really awkward in that courtroom Monday when Wendi takes the stand. Now, at this point, she's going to take him a document, and she calls him Mr. Garcia, and he says, RIvera, that's twice. I put that little clip on YouTube, by the way, and she apologized. She hands him a paper that has a photo of everyone's face. Now, on March 11th, 2025, he made marks on that paper and signed it, and he was asked to circle everyone involved in the conspiracy. The defense asked to put a number 1 in a circle. Who was the person who was in charge of this whole deal? He circled Katie. Then they asked who did this killing, so he circled Sigfredo and put a number 2 there. They asked him to put a number 3 next to himself, and he did, and then put number 4 next to the man was killed, and he did with a photo of Dan. And we asked you to put a number 5 next to the person that wanted the man killed, and that was Wendi. RIvera says yes. Then they asked about the 2 people at the top of the page, Donna and Harvey. And then we asked if you knew if they had any involvement in this, and you said no. So I asked you to put X's by them, and you did. He says yes. There's no redirect here. It took me a minute, you guys, but I wanted to read this handwritten page that they brought up in openings where Donna had allegedly asked these jailhouse informants to memorize this to eventually testify at this trial. So the way this is written, as if this inmate has approached Donna in jail to give her information. But this all came from Donna's head, according to the inmate. Here is what was on that paper as far as I could read. The question, why did you speak to her? The answer, I knew I had information about Katie from the many times I had been with her in jail. Question, what did you tell her? Answer, I approached her. I told her I had some information about Katie, and did she want to hear it? She said yes. I told her Katie said she told Charlie on the night of the murder that some friends of hers went to Tallahassee and killed him. She asked Charlie to give her the 1/3 of $1 million that he was going to pay so his sister could relocate with her children to Miami. He went crazy on her. Now, that probably isn't all of it. That's just what they showed on screen. So that is it for day 1. It was very interesting, and we finally got a peek of what happened with this extra investigation that started later last year with these jailhouse informants. You got Donna writing scripts, telling them, memorize it. And like I said in the recap for opening, she was offering them money, a place to live, veneers, prescriptions, things like that. Allegedly, this is going to be one to watch. 9:30 a.m. on Monday is the start time. They do have to address some things about a witness. I assume it's Wendi. But the state still has some preparation over the weekend to get through before they're ready to do whatever it is they're going to do. So the judge told both sides to be there at 8:30. The jury reports at 9:15 with a start time of 9:30 a.m. on Monday. And again, fully expect Wendi Adelson to take the stand. Gonna be a huge day. So come watch Live with the Alibis. I'll be live streaming. I'll be doing YouTube shorts throughout the day. And again, at night, I will do a recap of the day's best testimony in an hour or less. Appreciate all y'all that hung out today. We had some good conversations, and it's always fun watching with a group of people that have followed this case for many years. All right, that's it, you guys. Have a good weekend. I'm taking it off. We will see you Monday.